Are you appointed by God? If the answer is no, I'm not appointed by God, then thank you very much. I don't want to hear about it, because you don't have the right to talk in the name of God.
Bless you all for joining us today. I'm here with my brother Jahmeel.
Thanks for having me.
God bless you, brother. Thanks for joining me. And we are here today on the Mahdi Has Appeared channel live, and you're watching Where is God Today? So today's subject is the House of Saud and the custodian of the two Holies and their lust for power. Now, where do we start? Everybody knows about Al Saud and who they are. Al Saud is the obvious name bearer of what is known today as Saudi Arabia. And Saudi Arabia is well known in the world for being the center of Islam. It's where all the Muslims flock to annually to perform what they call the Hajj. We all know it as the pilgrimage. And the Hajj is basically, obviously, an obligation upon every Muslim once in a lifetime. And this is obviously on condition that you can actually afford to do so, etc. Now, what I want us to start with is how Saudi Arabia became known as Saudi Arabia. So we have the royal family of Saudi Arabia called Al Saud, or the family of Saud. And this family originates with a man called Saud. His actual name was Saud bin Muhammad al-Muqrin. And he was a tribesman, a head of a tribe essentially, and it was a part of his legacy essentially to establish something called the Emirate of Diriyah. His actual son, one of his sons anyway, Muhammad bin Saud, is known as the founder of what is known today as the Saudi state. Initially, the Saudi state were a bunch of smaller entities or smaller states, whereby these tribes essentially conquered the land. So, what do we know about Muhammad bin Saud? He essentially founded the Emirate of Diriyah, known as the first Saudi state. And they basically, him and his family essentially, over time developed this state. And, well, it says, originally, well, if you go back far enough, they actually descend from the Banu Hanifa, a tribe of Arabia, of which one well-known personality, I'm laughing because of who he is and what, he is known for. A theologist named Musaylama ibn Habib. Musaylama ibn Habib is also known to the Muslims as Musaylama al-Kadhab, or Musaylama the liar. Why is he called the liar?
If you look at the history of Musaylama, it's quite a funny, sort of ironic story, because at the time, he was actually a Christian in his, when he was a Christian that went to Jerusalem, and he was learning Latin and spending time amongst the priests, the clergy there. And what happened was he actually overheard the clergy speaking about a prophet that was prophesied to come to the Arabs. So when he goes back to Mecca and Medina now, he meets this Prophet Muhammad, and his like heart is ripped out of his chest because he really, really, really wanted to be this prophet.
Right.
And at the time he had like, you know, he was like handsome, he had wealth, he had charisma, and he was, you know, reported to be able to perform miracles, or he was a good magician. There was this sort of theme around.
Right.
And he was a good speaker, he could gain a following. So he
had his own following.
Exactly, yeah. And he, in essence, you know, went to Prophet Muhammad and said, like, hey, look, I'm a prophet too. Could we like share this thing? You have this part, and I'll have this part of Saudi Arabia, and like we can rule together. And obviously, the Prophet said, like, absolutely not. God gives to who He gives and to who He chooses.
Yeah.
And
he spoke with authority.
Exactly.
Of course, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, wouldn't want to share something divine with somebody who had personal interests and personal gain at the sort of forefront of why he was pursuing
Exactly, and God knows, and Prophet Muhammad knows who God appoints, appoints and who appointed, and it's himself. And you know, he knows obviously Imam Ali in that time. And
I'll just add to that, sorry to interrupt you there, but God also knows what's in the hearts.
Exactly.
So he knew.
Exactly. So he knew this is a definite false claim, and we mentioned it in the episodes when we were speaking about the Roman Catholic Church and you know all of these different people and characters that stood up against God's appointee. And like for me, this is the equivalent to Simon the magician in the time of Simon Peter. He has exactly the same, pretty much the same story. He can perform miracles, he has a following, he's good at speaking, and he offers to, in the time of Simon Peter, offers to buy his way into sort of prophethood or priesthood or you know, being an apostle. So you see a lot of similarities in this character, we're saying with the great liar.
So the whole point in mentioning Musaylama, right, is he's actually the forefather of Al Saud. They descend from his line. Okay, now back to the formation of this emirate or state of Diriyah. So it was at the time of the formation, like when you know the Saud tribe had sort of gathered to form this state, that they actually formed a treaty or a binding contract with another family, and this family is descended from Muhammad Abdul Wahhab, who is basically the father of what is known today as Wahhabism. And Wahhabism is a very extreme branch of what people call today Islam. So what was the binding contract? The binding contract was that the Saud family basically run the politics of the state, whilst what they're known today as Al-Sheikh, i.e. the descendants of Muhammad Abdul Wahhab, they basically they run the religious side of this state. So the two together essentially dictate the affairs of the people, the affairs of the emerging state or nation. So the relevance of that obviously is what we have today, being the Wahhabi version of Islam. That essentially originates at this juncture, at this point. And obviously it's in the interests of the Saud family to fund this ideology in order that it endorses their power. It's quite a sinister little
scheme they've got going on.
Literally, right?
And I think they go hand in hand because you have like political power with the Saud's family basically being the Emir, the prince of the country, and then you have the Wahhabism being like the Imam of the country.
Or the Wahhabi Sheikh being the Imam of the country.
So like whichever way you look, as they're together, it's like it's just one and the same. So they have the same agenda, and they can sort of fool you and come at you from different angles, but the end result is going to be the same. It's what they want, and they're one and the same, which is
so. From this point on, we're talking within like a couple of 100 years. We have another treaty but this time, this is very, very sinister. So we have the Treaty of Darin. The Treaty of Darin is a pact made in 1915, and it was between the United Kingdom and Abdulaziz Al Saud, sometimes called called Ibn Saud, who is essentially at the time the ruler of another emirate, which they had obviously conquered, the Emirate of Nejd and Hassa. So it's about 15 to 17 years later that we have the formation of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and it's from this pact. Now, before we continue there, part of the terms of the pact, this is actually like very, very revealing. We have Abdul Aziz obtaining the following from the British: a recognition as the ruler of Najd and its dependencies under British protection. He gained a loan of £20,000 back then and a shipment of arms in June 1916, and a monthly stipend of £5,000 and from the end of World War I to March 1924, an annual stipend of £60,000 in January 1917. Now that just says one thing to anyone who's of sound mind.
Yeah.
This royal family, or this this ruler, basically worked for Britain.
Yeah, and
right?
it gets worse after. We'll get into that later.
This is like a colonial power that, after World War I, through the Sykes-Picot agreements, basically divided up the world, essentially, especially the Arab world, or the Muslim world. And so, essentially what we're trying to say is, okay, like we can actually support this with a video from Abba Sadiq, from him, his peace. If we can bring up the first video.
By Allah, Nimrod and Pharaoh were more merciful with their people than some of the tyrants ruling over you today. My grandfather, the Prince of the Believers, Ali alayhi salam, when he ruled over you, said, I have come to you wearing this shirt of mine. If I leave wearing another, then call me a traitor. These false leaders and rulers of yours came in wearing a shirt and refused to walk out at all, while wearing your entire country as if it was their inheritance. The Saudi royal family, the so-called custodians of the grave of my grandfather, and the custodians of the house of Allah, have an estimated net worth of $1.4 trillion. The Emir of Kuwait and his family have a net worth of $360 billion for them alone. MashaAllah.
That's pretty astounding. Now, that's part of a bigger sermon of Abba Sadiq, from him, his peace, entitled The Traitors.
Yeah, this is him declaring himself innocent from the traitors of
right?
The Muslim world.
Right.
Something
now,
pretty much that title. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So the traitors being the people who are in charge of these countries.
Yeah.
Now, it's quite shocking when you think about $1.4 trillion. Here's a few facts. The royal family of Saudi Arabia is comprised of 15,000 members. So you've got $1.4 trillion split amongst 15,000 people, but in reality it's actually 2,000 of those 15,000 that actually get the wealth. They're the ones who basically say, okay, we'll do this with this money, we'll do that with this money, and so on and so on. So that's just insane to even think about. Like, that's a million, right? 0.4. A million, what, like 1.4 million, which is ridiculous.
Yeah, it's an insane amount of money.
Right, and they make this money from a company known as Saudi Aramco, which is obviously an oil company, and that wealth, like even if you were to take 5% of that, would solve poverty in all the Muslim countries, right? Like if it was divided up between those who are needy.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, they wouldn't be needy anymore,
exactly.
Right?
And I think, you know, when you look at it, the Saudi Aramco stands for Arab American Oil Company, right? And as you mentioned earlier, they were in cahoots with the Brits. And as we know now, we'll get into, you know, the later episode there, have strong ties to Israel. It's like they've, well, and it's true. It's fact. Like if you look, again, as we always say, if you put everything on the table, this is what you'll find. You'll find this shocking truth.
Yeah.
And we saw a lot of similarities again to this Vatican establishment that they have over there, where they basically grabbed religion and this guise of God and commercialized it so that they could, in effect, use God to make money and use that as a means to gain wealth and power in those regions. And we see nothing different from what we call, well, what they claim to be the custodians of the two holies.
Exactly. The two holies today, being the two holy mosques of Saudi Arabia,
basically. And it reminds me of the verse of the Quran which says, among the people are those who say we believe in God and in the last day, but they're not believers. These are the people that are exactly munafiqs, hypocrites, that you know, they have the means to help. And if you watch this video where Abu Sadiq, you know, from his peace, declares innocent of the Muslims, innocence from these Muslim leaders, you'll see just how sort of tyrannical and power hungry and selfish they actually are, because they're not helping savagely selfish, and they're not helping people that are believing in the same God as them. They're not helping people, even though Prophet Muhammad and Jesus and all of the Prophet's messengers came forward, you know, telling you to be selfless and to share and to love thy neighbour, on all of these sort of, you know, selfless acts. They're not doing that. They're letting people in Yemen die. They're letting people in Sudan die. They're letting people in Gaza, Palestine, all of these war-torn countries be absolutely obliterated by people that, again, they're in sort of cahoots with these, like the Brits, the Americans, the
arms dealers,
exactly, the arms dealers that they get in even their own, you know, weaponry and war machine from. And it just goes to show you that they don't care actually about God and His people. What they care about and what they worship is the dollar, their pound, their petrodollar, they call it, or you know, their currency, their power and wealth.
Their power, which is obviously from their wealth, right? But an additional point to that. So we know that Saudi Arabia has been at war with one of the poorest countries in the world, if not. It's definitely the poorest country in the Arab world, and it's one of the poorest countries in the world, which is Yemen. It's rare. It's sort of rarely really talked about in the news, but there is a famine going on there, and we are talking like unbelievable amounts of people, like literally dying of starvation, literally dying of the lack of medicine, and these are innocent people, but the Saudis are bombing them regularly, and they're there's no mercy, no mercy on these people whatsoever. So. That says a lot. But
it's really a humanitarian crisis out there. It's like a Muslim crime is what you could call it.
Absolutely, and that's quite a picture. But this is the thing, what would you expect from traitors? You know what I mean? There's no two ways about it.
And that's what they say, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, right?
Totally.
When we explained that Muslim as their ancestor is for a reason. It's to show you that he himself wasn't actually a believer in Islam.
Or God, for
exactly, or God. He just heard that there was going to be a prophet to this Arab nation, and he thought, he saw his name in stars and shining lights, and was like, I'm going to get that, and all of the good things that come with it, the historical.
Don't forget, he'd been studying Jesus, so he knew the impact that a religion would have.
Exactly, he wanted to be the Jesus to the Arabs.
Right, there you go.
And he wanted to have all of that fame and sort of fortune that comes with it, and power, I guess, that comes with it. And I guess when he didn't, he sort of went kind of underground, and I guess his family later down the line.
I'm going to refer to a movie that basically explains the very simple dynamics of it all. First comes the money, then comes the power, and then comes everything else, right? I'm not going to say the rest, but this is the point. So
Exactly.
he had a bit of wealth, but he wanted power.
Yeah.
And what's more powerful than being the mouth of God, right, to people? You know what I mean?
Exactly that.
So, yeah, like the custodians or the custodian of the two holies title, Khadim al-Haramain al-Sharifain, the custodian of the two holy mosques, right? That individual is very, very highly revered in the Muslim world, and is like, not only is he royalty, but he's treated as someone that's empowered by God, you know?
Exactly.
So that that sort of reverence obviously feeds into their agenda. And this is the thing. So, like, before we do continue, right, there is a relevance to us talking about the people in Gaza and like the wars that are going on and how they're a part of the wars that are going on and so on. So again, Abba Sadiq, from his peace, in a sermon that he released well over a year ago, like we're talking probably a year and a half ago, a year and 5 months ago.
Yeah, around that time.
He mentioned the punishment that was coming onto the people. And a lot of it has already come true and is coming true. And it's, at the time, it was a warning to the people to take heed and actually recognize the authority that he has from God in order that they may be saved.
Exactly.
So, what's happened since? Very little, right? In terms of that world, the Arab Muslim world, paying attention to him.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, no, they're still definitely asleep.
Yeah, like not just definitely asleep, but they're like this. Like when we do speak to people from that part of the world, the majority don't want to know.
Exactly. And it's funny that you did this action, because it just gave me not a flashback, but like just reminded me of the story of Noah.
No, exactly.
Because we are literally, well, he is literally inviting you to the Ark of Salvation and warning you that all of these, calamities, all of these end time signs are about to happen, all of these punishments are about to land on your doorstep.
Happening.
And it's actually a prophecy being fulfilled right now, this video that was recorded a year and a half ago. And he is the Noah of this time, inviting you to this Ark of Salvation. And just like what happened in the time of Noah, the people had their fingers in the ear saying, we don't want to listen to you, we want to hear it. And I mean, I guess one thing that won't happen in this time that happened with Noah is that they, attacked him and beat him unconscious, but that's definitely not going to happen here.
For sure.
But it just goes to show the sort of levels of ignorance and I guess just blindness of the masses.
One thing I will say that more recently, Abba Sadiq, from his peace, put out a video warning of the flood that's coming, but it's not a flood of water. It's a flood of blood, right? And it's like, and you can mock it all you want, but you're beginning to see the start of that, essentially. And what will come will literally shock the world. If we can play the clip talking about the punishment that's coming, that would be amazing.
I am inviting you to the seventh and final covenant between God and mankind. Accepting this covenant is the only thing that will save you from the punishment which is about to come down upon mankind. COVID was merely the beginning of that punishment and a precursor. More plagues and diseases will be unearthed and unleashed upon you. Viruses that were frozen and dormant for thousands of years will become live once again. Strange illnesses that were never seen before will fall down to the earth with comets and meteors. Sicknesses that are worse than the Black Death will sweep the globe. Wars will cover the entire globe until no man, woman, or child feels safe. The sounds of jets soaring through the skies, bombs exploding on the earth and sea, and the cries of human beings will haunt the human mind.
okay, now if that's not scary, I don't know what is, because literally we're seeing new diseases come up all the time now, aren't we? We've had the monkeypox that came up, we've had the variations of COVID.
Exactly that.
And we're seeing new, the medical world is in shock at the moment as to what's going on, and there's little warning stories every now and again that come out about this new plague or this new thing or whatever.
We're just waiting for something to evolve, and then that's going to be the next big pandemic. And not only that, it's, even as Abu said, when this whole thing of global warming, there's diseases that have been frozen for years that are coming back to life, and scientists and biologists are realising this, and it's out there in the news. Just go and look at it for yourself, and it's a scary thing to because when it's written in the Bible, it's on the mouth of the man appointed by God. You have to really sit up and pay attention, because it's about to happen.
Well, in addition to all of that, right, you literally heard the last thing he mentioned in that little clip there was the wars and how it will cover the whole globe, and how people will see the jets flying over their heads and the bombs everywhere. Now, I don't know about you out there, but I'm pretty sure that's what's going on with Gaza. I'm pretty sure that's what's going on with Lebanon, and I'm pretty sure that's literally we're at the beginning of that big issue that's kicking off now. The war, the world war.
You've got the Ukraine-Russia thing.
The Ukraine-Russia thing, that's over a decade old now.
Yeah. But it's really heating up right now, and obviously it's all over the news right now. What is actually in the news right now is
tensions are ridiculous.
Lebanon,
geopolitical tensions are insane,
and everyone's picking sides. If you notice, it's there's an agenda with all these different countries, and this evangelical is Zionist Jewish sort of side pairing against this Islamic side, but it's a separated Islamic side from the Saudis that we're talking to today, because you'll find them actually siding more so with the Americans and the Zionist Jews, which now we know was actually not that surprising, because their descendants were actually Christians, so they don't really have these.
Well, there's more about that, by the way. The Saudi royal family descend from a Jewish mother as well. Which basically is for us it means very little, but for the Muslim world it just means that they do have a loyalty to the Jewish state. Now, to endorse that, to support what we're saying, recently, as in within the last 4 or 5 years, there have been a lot of business agreements that have happened between the Gulf states, including Saudi Arabia, and the State of Israel. And essentially, to the Arab/Muslim world, because of the whole Palestine conflict, that's seen as a betrayal.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? And essentially what that means is, as the video says, as in the video is entitled, these people are traitors. It's in their blood. And they are not only traitors to the people, but more importantly, they are traitors to the family of Muhammad, peace be upon him, because they stole the right to rule. As in they took this God-given right of the family of Muhammad, peace be upon him, and they took it for themselves. They empowered themselves over the rest of the people without any divine interjection, divine sort of authority. So basically what I'm trying to say is that regardless of what side they take, these individuals, these leaders, they have no right to be leaders.
There's no one that crowned them king. There's no God appointments going on. There's no sort of raising of your hand of a caliph as a caliphate like the Prophet did with Imam Ali. But what we see is actually two individuals with the ancestors of Saud and the ancestors of Wahhabism sort of pairing up and taking this right that doesn't belong to them,
this right.
and running with it. in the same way that we saw the Christians in the Vatican and the Holy Roman Empire, which we spoke about. Now you've got like the unholy Saudi Empire, who took the two holies and the land of the Prophet Muhammad and everything that he did and conquered and accomplished, and they just took it for themselves and ran with it, and even more sort of, audaciously so named the country after themselves and their family.
Yeah, exactly.
They call it Saudi Arabia, not even Muhammad's Arabia or the Islamic State of Arabia.
Yeah.
It was just
anything like that.
It was just our family's Arabia because it belongs to us.
Including the Kaaba,
belongs to us.
Which is, this is something that I wanted to connect to from what was mentioned earlier, which is the 2,000 people from the Saudi Arabia, the royal family of Saudi Arabia, who have access to this $1.4 trillion.
Yeah.
What are they using it for?
Yeah.
Right. Now, before we get into that, right, one of the biggest things they've been using it for is to spread the ideology of Wahhabism. And their target countries are generally the countries that do not speak Arabic and therefore do not technically have a high enough understanding of what's in the Quran. So this is the result of that, essentially, is what we see in places like Afghanistan, where the Taliban were in charge for so long and very oppressive, tyrannical, in fact. Or what we saw in places like Pakistan, like Bangladesh, like parts of Africa, like where the Wahhabi doctrine is forced on the people. And I know for a fact that in Africa there is an organization known as Boko Haram. And if that's not Wahhabi, I don't know what is.
Exactly.
And this sort of extreme one-sided version of Islam, which is very, very oppressive to the people, very, very, very oppressive to women in particular, and very, very sort of non-representative of God in any way, shape or form, because God is mercy, God is love, God is like all the positive attributes that we as human beings experience and want, right? But obviously, when you've got a corrupt doctrine which came from a sort of non-appointed by God individual, what do you expect?
It's funny because the more we speak about it, especially in this episode, the more it is sort of coming to the front of my mind that you just see these history repeating themselves incidences. And this one here, like you just said, is like this corrupt doctrine whereby people then go out and have a religion that is basically their own, and they go and empower themselves, and like for example, like you said, oppress women, for example. We see a lot of similarities with Paul, actually. Paul the Apostle, who did the exact same thing. He came with a doctrine that was corrupted version of Christianity, in the words of the Bible. He also made women cover their head, which was never part of Christianity, that Jesus came with. And in fact, told them to shave their head.
That thing that like what you've literally just mentioned there. Paul managed to somehow get that to become a very prominent part of what we see today in the Islamic world.
Exactly.
Right? Now, what's crazy about that is if you go back and look at pictures from like the 50s and 60s, so as recent as that, like less than 100 years ago, and you look at like like for example a very, very prominent sheikh marrying off his daughter. If you look at the pictures of his daughter getting married, she's not covering her hair at all. In fact, there are several pictures that are so we've got the University of Al-Azhar in Cairo, which is the prominent Sunni university. It basically, like, all who go and study there essentially become like clergy. Right? Now, this university was headed by like non-covered women. There was like, women who were involved in the higher management of this entity, like throughout the 50s and 60s, who were not covered at all. And there's definitely an image of the head of Al-Azhar from, I can't remember which year, where he did marry off his daughter. I've seen it myself. And like in the press, her pictures like, you know, uncovered hair and looking quite, you know, ready for a wedding and so on, and as you would expect. But this, like, well, when we look at the world today, we see this enforcement of the application of the hijab. Yeah. Our sisters have covered the, you know, whether the hijab is an obligation or not in one of the shows. The Disturbing Truth. Yeah. Look for that on YouTube, you'll see it. And Abba Sadiq, from him his peace, actually covered that issue specifically in one of the videos in the School of Divine Mysteries. Yeah. So again, search for that. In fact, that's probably a lot more eye-opening than anything else that refers to the hijab. Yeah. So, yeah, like all we're trying to say here is that there are many corruptions that people have applied, right, without actually understanding their source or
questioning it even.
Right, and it really is atrocious. It's a sad state of affairs. Yeah. You know, and a lot of it does connect to this royal family.
Exactly, and a lot of it's just innovation and control and power. And again, they're not here. These Saudi royal families, these Holies, the owners of the two Holies, they're not here for the people, and they're here for this power and wealth. And if you look at it today, who are they like shaking hands with? Who are they making deals with? It's actually the oppressors of Muslims on the apparent, the old
colonial powers.
Exactly, basically. The likes of Netanyahu, the likes of, you know, there's images of, you know, as we were saying about they've amassed all this wealth, but what they're doing with it, what they're doing is making like futuristic, crazy, like ridiculous cities like Neom, for example, where they've got like their hand on this like crazy globe dome thing, and you've got like Netanyahu on one side, and I think it's Donald Trump.
It's actually I know the picture you're talking about, and I wish we had it to show, but it's actually it's Salman, King Salman, and Trump on his left, and Mohammed al-Sisi on his right. And what they're holding is a glowing globe, which is supposed to represent the earth, and it's supposed to be them essentially having their influence on it. Yeah. So Mohammed al-Sisi is essentially
an Egyptian tyrant,
the pharaoh, the modern day pharaoh of Egypt, right? Yeah. And Salman, King Salman, we're going to cover him. I think we're going to cover him tomorrow.
We'll bring the image up for that tomorrow. We'll get into that.
Muhammad, like Salman and his son, MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, they've essentially revolutionized Saudi Arabia. And,
great PR stunt.
Right, and it's essentially for, like, it is literally a world publicity stunt. Yeah. Right, it's to
clean up their image and to make people.
It's in order that people overlook what they're really doing, like the war in Yemen, you know, and to think positively of them because they're seen as progressive and sort of liberal, you know, when in reality they're just like power hungry and deviant and. Like, we all know the stories of the princes when they come to, for example, London, and
the dwarf of Harrods in their custom cars and golden Lamborghinis, and that's their real car.
Ridiculous, like sort of
lavish lifestyles.
Yeah, but like there is something else I wanted to point out, and this was like something that one of the princes was in the press not that long ago, like within the last 25 years. For abusing his lover. Yeah. His, like, I remember seeing images of him smacking a man in a lift. Yeah, yeah. And this man was his servant stroke lover. Yeah, yeah. You know,
there's a ton of scandals for sure.
Yeah, it's crazy. For sure. But this is the thing, like, he was charged, I think, there was a court case, and all of a sudden...
He just disappeared, went into hiding kind of thing.
Yeah, like, it's gone. Yeah. Diplomatic immunity. Yeah. And that's their most powerful trump card, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly that. But yeah, I mean, it's shocking to think that all these people have so much wealth and power with no actual authority to have it. And
it's not just the authority, but it's the extreme to which they'll abuse it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's why they don't have the authority, because God, like you said earlier, God knows what's in the hearts. And there's just one other video I wanted to bring up, which talks about these people and what they came from to where they are now. And we can just run through a little bit about the Kaaba too after that. So can we just bring up that last video?
The trustworthy is belied and the liar is believed. I am the one who came to you during a time where women resemble men and men resemble women. I am the one who came to you during a time where the mosques would be adorned but empty of guidance. I am the one who came to you during a time where nothing remains from the Quran except for its writing, and nothing remains from Islam except for its name. I am the one who came to you during a time where Muslims are called Muslims, and yet they're the furthest thing from it. I am the one who came to you during a time where the Muslims fast during other than the month of Ramadan, and break fast in Ramadan. I am the one who came to you in a time of wars and rumors of wars. I am the one who came to you during a time where the scholars of Islam are traitors and liars. I am the one who came to you during a time where the leaders of the people are the worst of them. I'm the one who came to you during a time where the Bedouin nomads compete in the construction of tall buildings.
So yeah, I mean, that is extremely clear. This is the time that we're living in today. He even in this clip mentions wars and rumours of wars, and that's what we've mentioned earlier. It is definitely happening today. And when you look at it, these Bedouin nomads, which is what they really started out,
literally, like, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but the Bedouin nomads, remember that guy I said, Saud?
Yeah.
Literally a Bedouin nomad.
They were just Bedouin tribes around, and he just went and conquered all the other Bedouin tribes. And now he's the most powerful.
With British arms and British money.
Exactly. The
That's the advantage
he's the British Bedouin tribe.
Yeah, literally.
So, I mean, let's look at it, because these are the Bedouin tribes that are, extremely powerful and rich now. And let's look at some of the things they've done with their money and land, which encompasses the two holies. So I've got a couple of slides that we can just run through as we speak about it. But they are all depicting, great grand buildings, and like if you look at these images, the Kaaba is just this tiny little square.
Little box,
Exactly. So they're like, in effect, when I see these pictures and when I look at it like sort of objectively and I guess a little bit philosophically, it's like saying, hey, look, there's the Kaaba, that's the grand thing of the Prophet Muhammad.
And God. That's what represents God.
Yeah, this is what we've done. You guys go tour around. But actually, here's what we've done. We've got this great big clock tower. I can't remember what it's called, but it just reminds me of the Eye of Sauron from Lord of the Rings.
Literally.
And you have all of these great skyscrapers and all of this great sort of architecture, which makes the Kaaba actually look pretty insignificant. Literally. Like, unless you're looking for the Kaaba, if you see some of these grand images that we hopefully have on screen right now, you wouldn't notice the Kaaba.
Incidentally, by the way, that big clock tower that you're referring to, that's actually a huge hotel stroke mall, right? Now, it's a very, very, very expensive place to, like, sort of visit.
Exactly.
Like, as in, if you're staying in that hotel, it's cost you a ridiculous fortune.
I mean, just look at the price of going to do Hajj.
Well,
I mean, that's the crazy thing in itself.
That whole, like, sort of taking advantage of the goodwill of the Muslims, right? Like that, exactly. that's a commercialization over, like, the process of Hajj.
I mean, it's disgusting, and if anything, it should be actually the other way around. It's like, hey, we will help sponsor you to come and do Hajj, not like you have to make like thousands of pounds to go do it.
They do, but it's such an insignificant number. Right, because they want to make money from the people.
They've turned it into travelling tourism. The Hajj is not pilgrimage, just travelling tourism.
It is. It's religious tourism.
Exactly. And there's just the last slide I'm going to bring up is a hadith that actually mentions what will be happening in the end times, with regards to making Hajj and pilgrimage. So I'll read it to you. It says, the time will come when the rich will perform Hajj for leisure, the middle class will perform Hajj for trade, and the scholars will perform Hajj for showing off, and the poor will perform Hajj for begging. Man. And I mean, that really paints that picture.
That's a complete change of priority.
Exactly.
But this, essentially, by the way, like everything we've talked about so far, right, it's connected to one British personality that is quite famous. Guess what the name is? T. Lawrence Arabia. Bang on. That man. So it started with an agent, and it was a matter of convincing others to become agents, and now we see the legacy of that agency. So, before we do go, we'd like you to check the book, The Goal of the Wise. I really do recommend that everyone on planet Earth read this book because it's incredible. Tune in tomorrow where we will talk a little bit more about this atrocity of a family. And God bless you all. Thank you for tuning in, and have a good night.
Are you appointed by God? If the answer is no, I'm not appointed by God, then thank you very much. I don't want to hear about it because you don't have the right to talk in the name of God.